Hi, everyone. I'm Lori with Behavior Education at Spirit Keeper Animal Sanctuary. Welcome to Serpente Sunday for December 31st, 2023. We're almost in the new year, but before this year ends, I am so excited to share with you part 3 of Natalia's interview about her life with her corn snake, Janeway. And in this episode, she's going to talk with you about traveling with her snake, moving with her snake, and how she managed a real life emergency with her snake. And I think this is my favorite episode of this whole interview because of the subject matter. So, again, you're going to listen to how she has managed moving with her snake, taking her snake on vacation with their family, and also evacuating during an emergency with the snake. So, I hope you enjoy this as much as I enjoyed discussing this with Natalia. And until next time, everybody, please remember to always be kind, love your animals, and have your own plan in place for if there's an emergency that involves your snake or if you have to move or take your snake with you on the road. You mentioned traveling with her. So you take her with you when you go on family trips.
I do take her with me because my husband and I we do a lot of car trips, road trips. We like road trips a lot and we see family. So I take her with me mainly because I don't have someone to leave her to watch her. My mom's not going to reach in and change the water. And I don't really trust other people to like open the tank and let her out and not lose her. So, you know, I'm not like putting her in a plane and going backpacking through Europe with her, but I do she does shift out on her own. So typically the night before the trip, I'll just like our usual routine, I'll open the tank, she'll shift out. And she'll um right now she'll use her tree branch. So I'll put her in the play tent as usual. She'll go in her glove box as usual. And then that glove box gets put in her transport tote, which is this thing here, this thing. That's there by the side of her tank at all the time. And she's able to like crawl in it or over it whenever she comes out. She has the option for it. And so she's very used to it. It smells like her. It has her tubes and paper towel tubes and things. Plenty of space for her to move around. And then she's typically the last thing that goes into the car. She gets her own seat in the car. We like seat belt her in, and I tape a little, thermometer, hydrometer to the outside, and I have one in her tote pointing out so I can keep, track of how hot or cold she's getting. I try again around 70. And then I pack up her play tent to take with me, to the family member's house. They know I'm coming with a snake. I mean, I'm their family member, so they know what to expect with me. And she is a tent snake while I'm visiting. So she lives in her play tent that she's very much used to. We build this up over years, where she's very comfortable in her tent. She's very comfortable shifting out. She's very comfortable in her shift tub. She's very comfortable spending time in her tent. And then, yeah, she just lives in her tent for the time I'm at my family members. I change water. I do travel with like reptile heat packs. So if I need to add extra heat to the outside of the travel tote or to the tent, that's really easy to do because I can stick the heat pad under the tent. And I travel with my temp gun as well, so I can check the temperature of it. And I'll put a hide over it so she can go and warm up if she really wants to. But I've noticed that she will use her basking, she will use her halogen and UVB, but she's very comfortable in like low 70 temperature. Yeah.
How many times have you traveled with her? How many trips have you taken her on? Not including when you've moved, but just family trips.
I want to say she's gone on about 4 now. Yeah. And we're
So
about to
it's
do another.
something she's pretty used to.
she's pretty used to it. And I have videos of it on my Instagram where she's in the car, she's out, she's crawling around in the travel tote. You know, she's like, where are we going? What are we doing? And if we open the doors, because the tote obviously has like vent holes. If we open the doors at a rest stop or whatever, she's at the vent hole, you know, flicking her tongue, like, oh, so this is New Jersey, right? I'm like, welcome to Jersey, Janeway. And she's like, this is interesting, you know? So again, knowing ahead of time the kind of household we had, she's fit right in. And it's made keeping her really enjoyable. I'm having the experience I wanted to have. Um,
Talk to me. I know that she's also traveled because you've moved, and she also had to relocate due to an emergency. So
yeah.
I guess first, talk to me about how you moved with her and transitioned her during that move, and then we'll get into the emergency situation that you had.
So we moved from Virginia to New York, and that was very stressful. We ended up, the house we were going to rent um, fell through last minute. So we had to get an Airbnb that was like in a basement, which is why we had the emergency we had. But my husband, you know, we did a container, like we filled a container and this our stuff was getting shipped. And then we had to get it stored because we had nowhere for it to arrive. So we ended up having to store this container for a while. But my husband drove a little van, hauling like our plants and stuff, and it had one of our dogs. Our dog Rosie had passed away by then. And Janeway in her tote, like in the passenger seat, basically, like again, like seat belted in. So he drove up the animals, and then I drove the minivan with the kids and my mother. And he drove through the night to get to the Airbnb and set up for the kids. And then I drove up the next day, and then we went a lot slower. And then she lived in her tote maybe 24 hours and he changed the water. But then when I got there, I set up her play tent. So then she lived in her play tent for about another day until we could get the kids settled into the Airbnb. And then I set up her tank. That was the first thing, you know, that went in the van. So that was the first thing that we unpacked and set up was her tank.
And did you set that up identically to how it was set up before? Did you totally clean it out, or did you leave some things in it? How did you handle that?
I left everything exactly the same. So it was not bioactive. It is now. I think if we move again, I would have to do it differently because it is much heavier now. But back then we were using, you know, cocoa fiber, I think it's called, cocoa blocks. So they're a lot lighter, actually. And so I kind of just anything that could fall off or maybe break the tank, I pulled out. And it went in a separate bin. And then, but all the bedding and things that I had permanently affixed to the tank, like I have bathroom shelves, I kind of stuck to the side so that she can climb on and stuff. Those stayed, obviously. And then the tank moved with the bedding in it. And then when we set it up, it had a stand at the time. We've since then put it on something more permanent, but then we set up the stand, put the tank on it, and then waited till I had, you know, like some time to unpack the enclosure items and then put it back in. But she actually, I went to put her back in, she didn't want to go back in. And I think it was all the new smells from the Airbnb, and like it was her first time in New York, you know. So she was smelling all the smells, and she like went in and went right back out. So I think she spent another night in her tent, and then the next morning I moved her with, you know, in a hide back in for the day because she at that point, and it was in the summer, so I really wasn't worried about heat too much because it was still like mid 70s in the Airbnb. But I did want to get her heat and UVB and things like that. So Then she went into the tank where I could like had set up her lights and stuff. Like setting up the lights and the thermostat and all that, that takes time, and I have to like make sure the wires are untangled and all that stuff. So
And then how long were you there before you moved to where you're at now?
we were so from September to December. So no, August to December. So August, September, October, November. So like 3 months.
And during
So
that time, you had an emergency.
yes, so we moved to New York in August 2021. And in September 2021, right when I first started my job, as a professor, um, a hurricane hit New York. I think it was like Hurricane Ida, something. And New York, and we were staying in a basement Airbnb in Flushing, Queens, which experienced like unprecedented flooding. Unfortunately, people lost their lives, like stuck in basements and all that stuff. So we had we had not stayed in the Airbnb during Ida, but when we came back, I guess there had been some damage. Like water had been coming down the basement stairs and stuff. There was a drain there, but there had been, I think, enough damage to maybe the house or something from the hurricane that, like, I want to say a couple of days later, water started falling through the ceiling, like a pipe burst. And I guess it was like the flood waters had like risen and like piping had been damaged all over the city. So I was out with the kids and my mother, and my husband was home alone with the dog and the snake. And I'll preface this by saying I'm pretty much like 99% the person who handles Janeway. Like my kids help and my husband supports. Do you know what I mean? Like, and doesn't say no, kind of basically is his role. But he does not, he does not handle Janeway, doesn't interact with her nearly as much as I do, kind of thing. And so when the water started coming through the roof and up the drains, he was like, we have to evacuate, right? And he's with the dog. And so he opened the tank. So I have 12 big clips that seal. So he opened the tank. And at the time, Janeway was sitting in one of these bathroom shelves I have, which I have since removed because it had these little slats. And so he went to grab her out, I'm sure not in a horribly panicked way, but went to grab her out. And she, being a snake, and a corn snake, where they have a prehensile tail, she curled her tail around one of these little slats. And it was little enough that he couldn't get his finger in to unwind her. So she wasn't coming out. And so he called me pretty upset, like the apartment is flooding. It was like it was a 3-bedroom basement apartment. And he was like, the apartment is flooding and Janeway has curled her tail around this shelf that you have and I need to leave. Should I just close her back up? And I was like, no. And I was like, not anywhere near the house. And I was like, no. Show her her shift bin, which I keep by her tank. I always kept it nearby. And so he was like, okay, he put the phone down and let Janeway go and like showed her the bin, like just held it up to her. And she went right into the bin. She recognized it as, this is my bin. And so if he had put the phone down, so I just heard him yell, oh, she went in. And it was pretty like empty. It had maybe like a paper towel roll and like a folded up, like one of those accordion water bowls. And he just snapped the lid and left. So later, when we got back to the apartment, I dropped my kids off at my mother-in-law's house, came back to the house. There was a lot of water damage. and part of the roof had fallen into her tank. So I don't, so like the water didn't pass her tank, but I don't know how safe she would have been with, a ceiling coming down and pipe bursting and stuff. So when I went in, I did have to remove debris out of her tank. So that was one scenario where like her shift training really came in handy. And even in that stressful situation and someone having grabbed her, she fell back on her training. She knew that was a safe place and just went right in. And then I learned that I need an evacuation plan for everybody. It may not just be for reptiles. It's not just grab them and go. Thankfully it was fall, it wasn't too cold. But now in my shift tub at all times there's like a hide, paper towel rolls, a water bowl, a reptile heating pad, you know so that and I have just like bags of like bedding that just sit here. And so in an emergency, she has more things because it took some time before I could put her back in. So she lived in this bare tote for, about a day. Perfectly fine, perfectly safe, but I couldn't give her too much more because of that. And then my husband and I, the Airbnb people, gave us another Airbnb to stay at that hadn't flooded a few blocks away. But then my husband and I had to spend close to 24 hours moving again within a month of getting to New York. And, the first thing I moved was Janeway's tank, set up her lights, all this stuff so that I could get her back on heat and settled. And then we just moved everything else. So yeah, shift training and having a plan of what are you going to do in an emergency. You really have to think those things through with reptiles.
Now, does her tank have a double screen, just one screen? Did the screen actually break when the debris fell on it?
So the screen wasn't on it because he had taken the screen off. Yeah. But I don't know. I don't know if maybe the screen, it's not a double screen. It's like a basic tank screen. I don't know if it would have been damaged. Sheetrock is kind of heavy. Like it's not flimsy, thankfully, because it's structural. So I don't know if it would have been damaged. I know that I would have been a lot more stressed thinking that Janeway was in that environment. Then, once I knew my husband was out with the pets, like everything living was safe, I didn't care what happened. Whatever. Everything's replaceable. So I think if he had to, so that this is the thing too, he had opened the tank with all the good intentions of getting her out, he wouldn't have had time to put the lid back on. There's 12 clips. He's like, I'm either going to leave her or what do I do? Like, I can't rip this thing off. So that was really scary. And I'm not going to tell my husband, stay in this unsafe thing that we don't know what's going to happen, hoping that a snake comes out either, right? That's not really reasonable. So I'm glad it worked out the way it worked out, because if he had to leave her without the screen on, she wouldn't be in the tank at the end of it. Yeah.
I know I was really relieved and happy. I wasn't happy you had that emergency, but I was happy to hear that her shift training, her station training just paid off in that way, because I've used target training in a similar way, in similar, not evacuation emergencies, but when snakes have gotten places where they shouldn't be because I've didn't realize they had gotten out, or because I turned away and they got somewhere they shouldn't be. Like I had one get in the stove one time and I started to panic and my husband said, well, can you target him out? So it took my husband to remind me, oh yeah, just go get his target. And he came right out. I've used targeting as a recall for several of the snakes, and it's such a relief when the training pays off in a practical way like that. And I know I was just ecstatic to hear that that had worked out for you guys.
Yeah. And I had never thought that it would come in handy in that way. But after living that experience, it's like every snake should be station trained. Every snake should have a positive reaction to being presented with a bin. Like, I'm going in there and get them out, kind of thing, and obviously, like, in really bad emergency, grab them and go. I have now also learned not to have anything permanently affixed that she can wrap her tail around and which we cannot fit our finger through. So that shelf has been removed and replaced with a solid one. And she has some shelves here, but they're like, they're meant to be like kitchen counter shelves and things, but like everything else that has holes, little holes, I can take out. So if she's wrapped around, this netting, I'll just take the net, you know? Yeah. So I learned that the hard way.
So those are really, really good lessons for people and really, really a good learning experience, even though I'm very sorry that happened to you guys.
Yeah.
It's very valuable information for others to hear. So how long? So that's all for this episode, you guys. And you know why this is my favorite, because this was practical information. These are real life experiences that Natalia and her family had with their family snake, Janeway, moving with her and traveling with her on vacation, and then evacuating during a real life emergency with her. And I think that this information that she shared is invaluable to all of us who not only have snakes and other reptiles, but who have other animals as well. These are things we need to think about. And I think of all of the episodes that are coming out of this interview with Natalia, this is the most important and has the most valuable information. And I want to hear in the comments if you have gone on vacation with your snake, if you have moved with your snake, or if you've had to evacuate during an emergency with your snake, and how that went for you and how you handled that. And if you had to do any of those things, would you do anything differently in the future? So thanks for watching and learning, and I hope that this gave you lots to think about. And until next time, please remember to always be kind and love your animals.